All right, hey, welcome. We are live. This is Sunday, June 12th, 2016. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Anthony Magnabosco.
Hello, everybody.
Yay! And there was a lot of cheering out from the people on the other side of the glass.
Hey, guys.
Your face is dark, and it's probably because that light went out. I don't know if there's anything to fix in it, but
okay.
Maybe you lean this way. Well,
Let me try.
We need to move you out of the darkness into the light so that people can see.
A little better?
Yeah,
that's okay.
They need to see your friendly face.
Well, hello, everybody. It's so exciting to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Anthony and I have actually known each other for a couple of years. We really talked, we might have met before, but we talked the first time when I did that series of debates at the Church of Christ.
Yeah, that's where we first met.
And went out for burgers and discussion. That was a fun thing. But yeah. Anthony's here. He's been busy working on his own personal project on YouTube. That kind of partially began with Boghossian's book, Manual for Creating an Atheist. It's all about street epistemology. We'll talk a little bit about that, and we will take live calls because that's what this show is all about, interacting with callers. Tell us what you believe and why, and more importantly, perhaps, why you think other people should believe it as well. But we can get into that. There's a couple of announcements to make first. Phil came in to remind us about something that you know about.
Yeah, there's this project called the Texas Ramp Project, and it's a group of people that will go out once a month. I think it's all over Texas, but I definitely know it's in San Antonio. And you've done your first ramp project here in Austin. The ACA actually did it, and I think they're getting ready to do their second one. We will go out to houses that can't afford to build ramps to get their wheelchair-bound parents, grandparents out of the house. They're stuck there, and they've constructed all these very dangerous ways of getting their loved ones out of the house. We go there, we assess the situation. We use wood that's donated, and we spend 4 or 5 hours once a month, and we build a ramp for a house. And it's quick, and to see the joy on the people's faces when we're done, makes it all worthwhile. It's so cool. And
that's going to be.
I'd love to see it being duplicated here in Austin. That's
going to be June 25th, and the information is available at the ACA Facebook page right now. I don't know if it's actually up on the news portion of the Atheist Community of Austin website. We're going to get started chatting here in a minute, but there's something I have to talk about first because unfortunately, Sunday, June 12th, 2016 is the day of the one of the worst the worst mass shooting in the history of the United States, as far as we can tell. It's very difficult to address this. We're getting bits and pieces of information. It happened around 2 o'clock this morning. An individual armed shot an off-duty officer outside of a gay club in Orlando and then turned into a hostage situation. At the end of it, there are 50 people approximately who are dead. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 53 to 58 who are physically injured because of the attacks. And there are countless thousands who are distraught and emotionally wounded and trying to figure out if their friend or family member is one of the victims. There's a number of different pieces of information that have come out. The alleged shooter, his ex-wife has come out and said that he was mentally unstable, physically abusive to her throughout the time they were married, and that she sought a divorce because of this. So perhaps not much of a surprise that we're dealing with somebody who is unstable and prone to violence. His father has said that he thinks the motivation for this may have been because his son saw 2 men kissing in Miami. He's called 911 shortly before the attacks to announce his allegiance to ISIS, although there's no evidence that there was any instruction from ISIS for him to do this. And so the language about this has been kind of muddied. It's a hate crime. It is domestic terrorism. It is any number of other labels you want to put on it, but far more important than that, it's a demonstration that we are still not done with bigotry. We are still not finished with people engaging in violent acts on behalf of small-minded, hateful beliefs. There was a period of time in this country where you couldn't publicly be gay at all. There was a period of time where there really weren't any openly gay clubs. We've now made great strides. We got rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We have finally allowed for marriage equality. Religion is not the source necessarily of the homophobia and hatred directed at the LGBTQ community. But what religions do are encourage, exacerbate, and amplify those hatred, that bigotry that festers in a society. It makes pronouncements that if a man lies with another man as he lies with a woman, they have committed an abomination and you need to kill them, or that they are deserving of death, depending on how you read it. Imams in Muslim countries have been vehemently anti-gay, throwing them off buildings, killing them left and right. They're killing atheist bloggers, they're killing homosexuals. They didn't start the hatred, but they fostered it, and they nurtured it, and they supported it, and they tried to turn hatred and bigotry into a virtue. Let's clean up the world. Let's get rid of the filthy scourge that is the LGBTQ community. And so whatever this individual's motivations were, if he wanted to be famous and get on TV as a massive mass-killing shooter, if he wanted to please ISIS or some imam, if he was acting because he wanted to be what he thought was a good Muslim, if he just hated gay people, if he was perhaps closeted and made to feel ashamed and guilty of who he actually was, whatever the motivation was, the reality is that a bunch of people went out to have fun, not to harm anybody, not to do anything, but enjoy life and live in a time, in a country where they didn't have to go secretly meet with code words in a bathroom at a roadside rest area. They could go to a club, gay or not, to have a fun party with a bunch of other people. And because of that, 50 people's lives were ended and countless other lives were irreparably damaged. There's a lot of places to point blame. Social constructs related to gender roles, of anti-LGBT thoughts, the sanctity of marriage crowd, the various religions that make pronouncements about this and encourage hatred and violence. And it is absolutely heartbreaking to watch this happen. But I think that there is an upside. And I know that that sounds terrible that you're talking about deaths with some possible upside. But there's one thing that we've seen over and over again. And that is that when dogmatic, controlling religions begin to lose control on society, they begin to flail around, sometimes violently, grasping at any opportunity to exert their control and impose terror and try to tell the rest of society how to live. And now, today in the United States, we have a country where you can be gay and you can serve in the military and you can get married, and we're working towards better principles in society for everyone. And there's lots of arguments against bathroom bills and other stuff. And we see acts like this, and I prefer to look at this as a desperate admission that they have lost grasp of reality, that they have sacrificed their humanity, that they realize that they are on the losing side of a battle in which we will come out the victors with a much more civilized society with equality for everyone. And these acts are their desperate attempt to not let that happen. And so I encourage people to not let their attacks be successful, to go out and continue to live your lives, to be supportive of equality everywhere, to be loving and nurturing to the LGBTQ community during this time, to donate blood. I know that there was so many people went out and donated blood that the Red Cross and others said, we've got enough, stop. But there are plenty of opportunities to do this, and you don't have to wait for a horrifying act of violence on behalf of one person to get involved and be engaged and do some good. This, in a nutshell, is the principle behind secular humanism, and it is one of the reasons why I'm convinced that as religions go away, that what will replace it is some form of secular humanism, some form of decent communication and interaction between people that isn't rooted in violence, that isn't rooted in bigotry or hatred, where we recognize that we are, for whatever reason, to the best of our knowledge, all stuck here sharing this space, and we must find a way to do it without annihilating ourselves and without killing off the people who we have been led to believe are different from us when they're not. I don't normally evangelize on behalf of secular humanism as if it were the one true hope for humanity, but in many ways it may be. It may be that recognizing that we're here, even if there may in fact be some God out there, they don't seem to be interacting in any detectable way, they don't seem to be acting in our best interest. If they have a plan and everything goes according to their plan, then these sorts of violent acts are in their plan. And in that case, they can go rot in the hells that they created. And the rest of us will get about the business of making sure that we are loving, nurturing, compassionate, empathetic to everybody, irrespective of what category they may have been put in by some small-minded, violent bigot. And on that note, welcome Anthony Magnabosco. I probably should have done that more like towards the end of the show.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I don't know where to go from there other than to say that whether this individual was deranged or motivated by religion, I think it underscores the importance that we don't back down from when we meet people who have beliefs and say things that don't seem to be comporting with reality. That I think we do have an obligation to talk with them. If they're deranged, maybe they can get the help they need. If they're holding a belief and they think that a God exists or that prayer works, please don't back down from having talks with folks, because I'm frankly not that convinced that the government that we have is capable of fixing this problem.
Yeah.
It might have to start ground up, and I see tremendous opportunity for us to be on the vanguard of that.
Yes. And there's a lot of different areas where the secular community has not necessarily had the opportunity to do a great job, but had also not done a very good job when they were given the opportunity in areas of death and dying and grief management. We could easily, as secular humanists, be on the forefront of changing the way society in general views healthcare, mental health care as well, to remove some of the stigma so that people are more likely to get help, and so that when you see somebody who you think may need help, you have the tools that might lead them to help.
Exactly. That's what, in fact, back to the talk earlier today when we were talking about street epistemology, whether we are aggressive with a believer and helping a larger audience, or we're using the street epistemology approach, when it comes down to it, at least for me, and I suspect for you, but I think we're doing it because we want to help people. Right? We don't want to be jerks and shut people down, but I think we want to, at least for myself, we want to live in a world where people believe things that are true, and we're motivated by that, and we want to help people that might be holding a belief that isn't comporting with reality.
And if it turns out that it is comporting with reality and we just weren't aware of it, why wouldn't we want to know it?
Precisely. Precisely.
You know, you and I engage in slightly different ways. Not vastly different, though, because you spend more time in one-on-one conversations.
I prefer it.
But if you think about it, phone calls almost a one-on-one. It's a little, maybe two-on-one. We'll team up a little bit. But in both cases, there's an audience. In your case, there's an audience after the fact when it posts on YouTube, so that people can benefit from seeing these conversations. Yeah. Without doing the entire talk for today, give people kind of a nutshell view of what street epistemology is and isn't, and your experience with it.
Okay, so I've been using street epistemology, which, for anyone that's unfamiliar with the term, it originated from Dr. Peter Boghossian's book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. It even originated far prior to that with Socrates and asking questions to uncover the reasons why people hold beliefs. So what's quite different, I think, is that when I go out to have a conversation with a believer, even though it's tempting, I don't debate with them. I don't argue with them. I'm never telling them what to think. I'll ask them a question, I'll listen to what they have to say, and then I'll ask them another question. And typically, at the end of that, the person has a better understanding of what they believe. We were talking earlier before the show that sometimes we even see a drop in confidence from 100 to 70.
Sure.
It's quite possible that that person was always at a 70,
right,
but now they have a sharper idea of what it is they believe.
For clarity, so that we don't shortchange this conversation,
Yeah.
in a lot of your videos, you begin by asking them how confident they are in their belief to begin with. And a perhaps not surprising number of people just start off at 100%. And my suspicion is that this is the de facto answer in a society where belief is encouraged and doubt is discouraged. That no matter what their actual confidence level is, they're just going to start off, quite a lot of them, very high, maybe at 100%.
Yet even if that's the case, there's value in it, right?
Right.
Like that person will walk away thinking, I now have a better understanding of where I'm at, and maybe they revisit the belief that they hold, discard it, or find better reasons to hold the belief in the first place.
There's kind of two benefits. One is that they may come to the realization that their professed confidence level doesn't actually map to their actual confidence level. That, oh, I'm 100% confident, and then when we question them on it, you might get down to 75, 80%, 52%, 83%, whatever they're going to say. But that itself has a benefit in that you realize that you've expressed a confidence level that isn't accurate, and that can start a process that's very self-reflective of, why, maybe the question to end up with, maybe the question to conclude each of these with, when you start at 100% and they come down to anything less than 100%, maybe the final question of that 10 minutes or 5 minutes should be, why is it that you think that you were actually willing to say it was 100% when we've discovered that it was perhaps 80%?
Sure. I think a lot of people would probably answer that. I mean, it's a great question, but I think a lot of people would say, well, they probably wouldn't be honest and say, there's a social expectation that I'm at 100%, when I think that that's probably the case. But if anything, they might say, I don't know, and I need to think about it. Perfect.
Yeah, getting people to think, getting people to question. I mean, I like making people think. I like watching people think. It's one of the reasons why I like the videos that you've done, is because you get to watch the person as they stumped. And I love the fact that not only do you include pauses in the conversation, but you count your pauses in your tally on the side, because so when it comes to, for example, great oratory, there's breath, there's space between things. When it comes to even good music, when you listen to something like Pink Floyd, there are dead spaces that are in there for specific reasons, because we know that it gives somebody pause to reflect. We know that it builds anxiety. It's this structure of it that we don't always do. That we may just I am on occasion just going to rapid fire, boom, and then stop. Whereas you include more pauses. Watching people think during those intermissions, I suppose, even if they don't change their mind, is compelling to me, because I like the idea that people are thinking.
I'm pausing.
That's dramatic effect right there.
Actually, I think you're spot on. The pauses are huge, and it takes a long while to master them. And I've even stopped interviewing two people at once, because I can be having this great conversation with you, and if Beth was there, and you're thinking about the question that I just asked, almost invariably, the other person would find it as an opportunity to jump in and say things and ruin the moment.
Yeah, I have to fill that gap.
Yeah, or when I start asking similar questions of the other person, they might adopt the answers that I was getting from the other person. So there's something to be said for just doing one-on-one conversations. The pauses are huge, active listening to what they're saying, repeating it back so that they can hear it. Sometimes when you repeat it back, and you're not twisting their words in any way.
Just saying exactly what they said, yeah.
Well, when you put it that way, it sounds kind of crazy. I've had people say that. And when you see those moments of discovery, whether it's quiet, or if they're actually verbalizing something that they just encountered. I mean, that's so cool.
I think one of the things, and I've experienced this before, so I've done debates on my own, and I've done team debates. There are occasions where I like team debates. You divide the effort up. It's not the same thing as like a two-on-one conversation. And here in this setting, where it's going to be two of us with one person on the phone, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're not dogpiling onto something. And we'll try to do.
I've actually had apologists complain about street epistemology, that even when a one-on-one, you're intentionally asking so many questions to overwhelm the person. And that is absolutely not the case. If I can't understand what it is you believe, how can I possibly ask probing questions to keep covering it.
It's so strange that somebody would view this as a potentially unfair fight.
Oh yeah.
When all you're doing is asking them to explain why they believe. How's it unfair to expect somebody to give an explanation for why they believe it, and if they are incapable of doing so, simply acknowledging that they were incapable of it and moving on to somebody else?
That's a good question.
Yeah, lots of good questions. Maybe not lots of good answers. There are, and I have engaged with people on the street. Normally, I engage with street preachers.
I used to do that.
It's
I don't do that anymore.
Really?
No. Especially, I would go to have coffee with somebody that's a street preacher, out of the environment, away from the street, put the Bible down, tell me what you believe. But if they're at the Reason rally and they've got their signs, or they're in front of the Capitol building, it all comes down to honesty. We were talking about that earlier.
Yes. But I like the fact that I think I can expose any lack of honesty in them. So
I think you take enjoyment from the game of it.
There is a game.
Somebody was asking about, Don was asking the question about the ego. I don't know if you want to get into that or.
Oh, yeah. No, there's no denying. So if you're having a one-on-one conversation using something like street epistemology, you need to completely set aside your ego. This needs to be
neutrality,
as close to neutral as you can get.
Yeah.
I strive to do that on occasion, but I'm not denying that I will engage my ego and that I will, if I'm debating psi, I'm not there for psi. Mm-hmm. There's absolutely not even a pretense of me being there for psi, because I've essentially, for at least for the time being of the debate, I've written him off as a lost cause. If he changes his mind some of the time, I'm there for the audience. And the goal is, so we talked about this a little at lunch. In street epistemology, it's sort of a one-way conversation. I have this, you are this neutral entity that is asking questions where this person's trying to convey, and the most you do is use the Socratic method to sort of lead them to question their own things.
Okay, you do see that a lot in the videos, but there is a lot of back and forth too. I tend to not show those because I think people get tired of time and time again hearing where I am on the confidence of my belief and why am I an atheist, what would it take to change my mind. But yeah, when I'm going out there and I have a whiteboard and I'm doing my my little interviews, it does seem to be more directed and it's more one-way type of thing. But I'm completely fine letting it go like a back and forth.
Yeah.
They can ask me where I am on the scale or whatever, but I do like to, frankly, I do like to turn it around to understand what they believe.
Oh yeah. I would love an explanation. But the thing I'm getting to is, in a street epistemology, at least in the setting that shows in the video, it's you as an interviewer, them as an interviewee. You're asking questions, they respond.
Yeah.
This is different from a debate. And you used sort of the example of supernova versus light bulb, but you also did some really good examples with whether you have a one-person audience or a broad audience. And for me, a debate is, in its standard form, two people with different positions talking at an audience. And then the conversations that you're having is one person interviewing someone. And the conversation that I most want to have, and I want to turn my debates into this, and I want to turn my new video project into this, is two people having a conversation.
Yeah.
Because if it turns out that the person I'm talking to isn't a particularly good defender of their reasons, well, that exposes something and it educates us about something. But what if I was also terrible? What if you had two people who were absolutely terrible at defending what they believe talking? All that exposes is that neither one of them had any business doing this.
You know, it's funny, I started off having really long conversations with people, 40, 50 minutes, but I've intentionally cut those down and tried to make them less conversational and more directed, just to keep it shorter, because we know people have short attention spans.
Yes.
Get it down to 5-10 minutes. See what see if you can actually show some movement, show some doubt.
I can't even say my name in 5 minutes.
Yeah, me too. I've got that issue too.
I really, if it was an easy way to like dissolve a conversation to the point of where it's expository to everybody in 2.5 minutes, I'd love to find out.
It would be ideal. But I find myself actually getting away from the shorter 5-minute hit and runs, and I want longer, kind of like with your project. Yeah. I want longer conversations. I would love to have, some of the more recent videos I posted were 30 minutes, 40 minutes long. People gripe about it.
Yep.
They don't have time to sit through it.
The thing I figured out though is if I did a 5-minute video, somebody would be commenting, why couldn't you do that in 30 seconds?
Yeah.
And so when I don't have a target time. for the Atheist Debates Project, if I finish in 10 or 15 minutes with what I think is a pretty thorough treatment of what I wanted to say about a subject, great. If it takes 45 minutes or an hour, okay. My target is the people who actually want to understand this, who may benefit from what I know. There are plenty of people who wouldn't. There are plenty of people who know way more about these things than I do. They don't need to spend 45 minutes listening to me, but somebody might.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't get everybody involved.
You can't make everyone happy.
Unless you're on little 8-second vines.
Oh yeah, I try to throw up a variety of durations, and in those longer conversations, almost always it comes back to me. Like, why do you believe it? Why don't you believe in the God? What's your position on it? And I try to downplay that, because when we are using street epistemology, we don't want to influence the person. But there's a point where not giving that information becomes rude. So I feel obligated to actually give my position on some things, even though I'm afraid that it might be perceived by a viewer that I'm doing it to push an agenda.
Yeah.
So it's damned if you do.
I have one last question before we go to callers, but fair warning, the next video that goes up for the Atheist Debates Project is 3 hours long, and that's not a joke.
Damn.
I was fortunate enough to be able to be invited to engage in the Apologetics Academy, where I basically took questions from a bunch of different apologists for about 3 hours, and I'll be posting that up. But the last question is, let's dispel this right off the bat, or right before we get to callers.
Oh boy.
Street epistemology is not about Christianity or even just religion.
Right, right. There is a fundamental misunderstanding of street epistemology, is that we're out to destroy Christianity. No. The technique is all about uncovering the method that people use to get to a belief. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or you're Muslim or you're Hindu. Some of the best conversations I've had with people are about politics, why they think Donald Trump is better, or Bernie Sanders, for example, where they are on abortion, gun control. I've had some wonderful conversations. Some of the best conversations I've had are with atheists that are absolutely sure there is no God. And it's fascinating, where even after 5 minutes, you can see that they've never considered how dogmatic that can be and fundamental.
Somehow they haven't grasped this idea of absolute certainty being unattainable.
So yeah, it's a multi-purpose tool. It's ideal for one-on-one situations. I think we could probably end up using it for callers here. I've seen folks on this show, including yourself, actually use it from time to time.
My view is that, when Pete came out with the book and people started talking to me about it, I was like, oh, that's the Socratic method. We've been using that forever, and so has everybody who's come before me, all the way back to probably, I don't even think Socrates should get credit for inventing it, because the very idea of asking people questions and engaging this sort of conversation, it seems so intuitive to us now.
There was one other misunderstanding about street epistemology, is that you need to, as long as you're polite, then you're using the technique. And that's really not the case. Of course, it's important to be polite and respectful, especially when people are telling you things that you fundamentally disagree with. You want to try to be neutral. But it's really more important to just listen to what they have to say and be as neutral as possible, and just be open to possibly changing your mind.
Politeness would be a component of it, but not, I'm in a polite conversation doesn't mean you're actually using a particular method.
Right.
And the other thing is this is something that you learn the basics of, and then you have to actually go out and do it and practice it. There's a skill, and it's not necessarily for everybody. Everybody's not going to be uncomfortable. Everybody is not going to be comfortable in conversations, perhaps with strangers, perhaps with family members. We talked about some of this today, and I know you recorded today's talk, so rather than going through all of it today, when it's up, we'll try and get a link out. But
I want to mention one other thing too,
Absolutely.
that idea of having those conversations with people. Sure, you can be polite, but if you end the conversation where the person isn't reflecting on the belief, if you haven't imparted the gift of doubt, as I like to say, then I think it would be a failure in terms of approaching this from a street epistemology kind of view. I showed the illustration of the little pebble going in the shoe, and I love that, where you want to have that pebble nagging at the person, having them think about it, and eventually they'll hopefully address the pebble and try to figure out a way to remove it.
All right. On that note, as a reminder, this is a live call-in program. We're going to run until 6 o'clock, so we've got about an hour after the show's over. We get together and go to dinner at Threadgill's. That's at the bottom of your screen right now. After show hangout, Threadgill 6416 North Lamar. It's 2 or 3 lights up that way. Take a left, and then it's another left, and you'll see it. It's, you know, old home-style cooking, Threadgill's. It's where Janis Joplin used to work, etc. Yeah, I don't know if we'll be in the Janis Joplin room, but there's pictures up all over the place. So
Cool.
yeah, Pearl was a waitress there, and then, you know, of course, Austin being the live music capital of the world. And I'm going to say something that I've said just the other day. I hear folks who live here in Austin who talk about how great it is, and they'll say, "Don't move here," because, you know, there's this influx of people. Don't move here because you'll spoil it. Screw that. If you're a godless heathen and you have friends who are considering moving to Austin, tell them to get their ass here as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it's only the mega churches people who are going to have friends who are going to move here, and that's what's going to ruin it. Instead of keep Austin weird, you're going to end up with Austin being the death of live music and the Jesus-y capital of Texas again.
Well, don't forget about San Antonio too. We can use our
We don't
share
care.
of free thinkers.
We don't care about San Antonio at all. Why would you even want to live in San Antonio?
Are you kidding me?
I mean, apart from the Riverwalk, and I mean, there's just, granted, my favorite Mexican restaurant is in San Antonio, but there's good ones here too.
There's good food there. Avoid the Riverwalk. Yeah, that's
Avoid the Riverwalk. That's the only reason I would go.
Nah. No, it's a great place to raise a family. I'll just say that. I think it's wonderful.
Well,
not that Austin's bad, but
so
hey,
breeders head to San Antonio, and the cool people can come up here and hang
single
with me.
people here.
All right, setting all the fun aside, we've got Artane in Chicago. Thanks for waiting. Hello? Maybe we don't have Artane.
Oh no.
Can you hear me?
I can hear
Yes.
you now. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up? Can you hear me?
We can.
Hey, Artane.
Hey, what's up? Looking good, guys. Looking good. So yeah, it's funny that you're talking about epistemology today. I came across the episode a couple months ago, I think it was, where Matt, you were talking to another gentleman, and you said something about knowledge. And epistemology is normally what I talk about on YouTube and stuff like that. My name's Artane Logos on YouTube. And I just so happened to call today out of an itch in my stomach. It's just like, let me call. And you guys just happen to be talking about that, so that's awesome.
Maybe it was God.
Cool. Possibly, or it could be the universe, as Carl Sagan would say.
So what did you have for us?
So yeah, you were talking to I forget the young guy's name.
This is Anthony Magnabosco.
Young guy. I'll take that.
No,
the caller from last time.
Oh, the caller from last time.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Darn it.
Yeah, hey Anthony. By the way, hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up?
I was watching this episode, and the guy was talking about the Bible and why he believes the Bible, and you were kind of questioning him, and you said something that stood out to me as the reason why I called, and you said, well, we know that the Bible is wrong because we know how the universe began, we know how the earth began, we know how life began. And I was just wondering, like, how do you know all of that?
I'm not convinced that that's an accurate representation of what I said. We'd have to hear it back. What I've probably said is that a literal understanding of the Genesis account is in conflict with things that we know about, you know, the age of the universe and the order that things came into being. You know, you're not going to have light before stars type things.
And you know this, or is this just the currently held theory of the day?
Well, all knowledge is basically a currently held theory. We understand how physics works, and we understand how light is produced. We know that, you know, when it says in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, we know that didn't happen at the same time because the universe is about 13.7 billion years old, and the earth is about 4.5 billion years old, so they clearly didn't come about at the same time. We also know how planets form. The current best model, whether or not it has happened in every circumstance or not, is from gravity interacting on particles in an accretion disk from a star. But we don't have...
Have you ever seen any of that?
Have we observed this? We have observed it. We didn't observe it with ours because we weren't here to observe it with ours, but we've observed it in other solar systems and other star systems.
You know, I'm not familiar with the episode that Artane is talking about, but generally, what I find is that atheists are typically, especially ones that are on shows where there's a viewing audience, but we're typically pretty careful about making assertions on things that we don't actually know. So I'm a little curious as to what show you're referring to.
It is.
Well, I mean, that's not going to help until
Yeah, but my point is that atheists typically are very careful about differentiating between what we believe and what we know. So yeah, I'd have to look and see what you're actually talking about. But can I ask you, are you a believer?
In Yeshua, yeah, I'm a follower of Yeshua.
Okay. Is the Bible the main reason why you think it's true?
Is the Bible the main reason I think the Bible is true? Or
I'm sorry, is the Bible the main reason why you believe in Jeshua?
oh, well, aside from my personal experience with him, yeah, the Bible is where we find the revelation of Yeshua.
Okay.
Written down, that is.
So there's two reasons, it sounds like, why you actually believe in the God. Is that right? Like the Bible and then the personal experience that you have?
Yeah, I would say, but it all ultimately is God's revelation at the end of it. I mean, he's revealed himself through creation and through his personal revelation through Jesus Christ. So I would say it's multiple reasons why I believe, or I would say I know that God exists. So I can't just say, well, this is the reason why I know or believe. It's all of his revelation come together.
Would you know about
and I wasn't always a believer, so.
I'm sorry, what?
I wasn't always a believer. I was a professing atheist for a very long time.
Okay.
So something changed your mind?
Absolutely.
Was it the revelation that you read in the Bible that changed your mind? Is that what you're saying?
Part of it. Well, my journey was kind of weird. You know, I started searching for truth, if you will, a while back. I came home from the Army and stuff and got in front of a bunch of books and some computers and said, okay, how's the world working? And the more I tried to put the Bible to the back burner and say, okay, well, maybe it's just myth and fairy tale, the more my research brought it back full circle. So I would say part of it is reading it and understanding it and seeing how it clicks with reality. And then another part of it was just asking God to open my mind to it.
So I'm curious about, you used to be, you say, a professing atheist, and you changed your mind because you cared about the truth. So what method did you make use of to figure out whether or not claims were true?
Method? Well, like I said, I just started with what I knew, which was pretty much nothing. You know, I grew up, I never really had a chance to go to school like everyone else or research anything. You know, I was kind of green to everything. So I just started looking, and the more I looked, the more things, that didn't make sense fell apart, and the things that did stuck with me, and the Bible was just always there. And
I can understand the pathway to finding things that make sense to you. I'm more concerned about, because I think you'd realize you would probably find other people and talk to other people who believe different things because they make sense to them, right?
Right, yeah.
And so now I've got, let's say, you on the phone right now with things that make sense to you, and somebody else might call in later with things that make sense to them. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out which of you two is most likely correct. How could I do that?
Well, that's a very good question. I think you would have to, the only way to do that is to admit that you can't know, your butt from a hole in the ground to begin with, and the things that you can start with, they have to be justified outside of yourself. You can't start with yourself and say, I'm going to be the authority of what's true and what's not. You kind of have to surrender.
Okay.
Say, okay, God, if you're there, reveal it to me.
Yeah, okay, I've done that. And of the two of us, you're the one who's talking about things that make sense to you, which is what sounds more like you being the ultimate. I don't know for sure. So, I mean, I was a fundamentalist Christian for more than 25 years. I believed, I don't know, probably many of the things you do. And I fully admit that I don't know everything, and that if I'm going to get to anything that's that's truth, it needs to be rooted in something other than my own personal experience or personal opinion, although everything is going to be filtered through that. So how do I tell that you're correct?
See, this is the crazy thing, isn't it? See, I used to be the professing atheist my whole life, and my whole family's religious. I couldn't stand it, and I completely turned around. Whereas you started out, religious, I assume, or Christian, and then became an atheist.
Yeah.
But neither one of us are dumb, right? So there's an impasse somewhere. Where's it at, right? So I think that's the quadrillion-dollar question.
Would you,
Why is it that I believe this and you believe that, and we're both rational people?
Artane, would you agree with the statement that regardless of where we start, if something is true, we should all be able to determine what that is?
Whether we should be able to, or whether
we're an atheist or we believe in a God, if something is actually true, would you agree that regardless of where we start out, that if we used a reliable way to get there, that we could ultimately figure out if something was true or not?
Yes, we should.
Okay. So regardless of whether you were an
different.
atheist or now you're a believer, that the answer to your question could possibly be out there, regardless of where you're starting from.
Yes, absolutely. But I think we're motivated by personal self-interest that's, basically programmed into us. Since we're taught to compartmentalize, and
I don't disagree.
Down.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
But when I talk about, let's say, for example, let's set aside the God thing for a question. If we were to ask the question, how old is the Earth? Now, we never have to talk about personal revelation or personal experience or impressions. We just point to the evidence to reach that conclusion, right?
Yeah, but you're not infallible in interpreting the evidence.
You're not infallible.
This is why the age of the Earth has changed how many times throughout the centuries?
Yeah, but it's changed in what way? It's changed in the way that we are constantly improving the accuracy with which we can measure it. It's not like once upon a time we said we had a good mechanism that measured the age of the Earth to about 4 billion years, and then the next day we said, nope, it's 6,000 years. No, after that, our measurements improved, and we were able to estimate it closer to 4.5 billion years. And it's not.
When I look at history, I see it different. I see that we're, instead of what you would call improving, I would just say molding to fit our already preconceived notions and biases.
So you think that when scientists make a new discovery, there really isn't good reason behind it? It's just, this is the bias of the day?
No. That's not what I'm saying. There's a difference between the discovery of something and the interpretation of what it means.
Right, but I mean, for example, if we count the money in my wallet, it's not really subject to interpretation. It's either $15 or it's not.
Right, but that's different than the age of the Earth.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Drastically different.
How is it drastically different from the age of the Earth? Aren't they both facts that are able to be physically assessed?
I don't think they can be. They're not facts. I don't think the age of the Earth can be established empirically at all.
You don't think the age of the Earth can be not even to within an error level of 500 million years or something?
No, not at all. Because, well, for one, the method that you're using is built in with assumptions that you can't justify from the very outset. So either way you slice it, from a creationist standpoint or a non-creationist standpoint, there's no way to accurately date the age of the Earth.
So your position is there's no way to accurately date the age of the Earth, not even to tell whether it's closer to 4 billion years than it is to 6,000?
It's only accurate according to the assumptions that you're willing to grant at the outset.
I agree. I agree. Science is based on inferences, but these aren't just assumptions. It's not like they just pulled them out of their butt. These are dating methods that consistently produce accurate results without conflict in other areas.
Accurate to what, though? Like, what are you comparing it to?
Okay, so
other dating methods that built in with the same assumptions? That's not fair.
Well, what are the assumptions that are unfair? What are the assumptions that are unfair in dating the Earth?
When you're talking about dating the Earth, are you talking about using radiometric dating?
Well, radiometric dating is one aspect of it, and that's based on the observed decay rate, which is not really like pulling a random assumption out of your butt. But if you're going to say that you can't reliably date the Earth empirically, and that this is based on flawed assumptions, I'd like to know which assumptions are flawed. Which assumptions are you rejecting?
Well, it depends on what method you're talking about. If you're talking about rate of decay, I mean, we all know that those are built based on assumptions. You have to assume the amount of parent element that was initially there. You have to assume it wasn't contaminated. You have to assume a bunch of pieces. You have to assume that there was no flood, etc. Which
we don't have to assume there was no flood.
Based on faith.
We don't have to assume there's no flood. The only assumptions are based on the direct observations of how things act, and there is an inference that they're somewhat consistent. But when we test to date something and we use 8 or 10 different mechanisms, and these mechanisms are accurate to different error rates that we can calculate by testing the dates of other things, you begin with some simple knowns and you extrapolate from there. I agree with you that we may not be able to date the Earth to the day of the week, but to say that we can't empirically assess the date of the Earth in order to tell whether it's closer to 4 billion years than it is to 6,000 years, it seems to me that you're throwing out all of science out of convenience. Because if you throw out the science...
All of science?
Yeah, because if you throw out all the science that is based on the assumptions that lead us to the dating of the Earth, what else do you throw out? I mean, are you okay with going to the doctor?
Well, that has nothing to do with the doctor.
So medicine isn't a science that's based on observation and inference?
That's nothing to do with measuring the rate of decay of radioactive isotopes.
Really? So when they inject you with barium and other radioactive substances as treatment for something, they don't have to know anything about that? Those assumptions are just wrong?
There's a difference between interpreting what we see. You know, we could both see that these things decay, but what it means is all these different things. That has nothing to. You could be a young Earth creationist and create vaccines.
But you can't be a young Earth creationist and be correct. You can't provide evidence to support young Earth creationism. You can't provide the same type of scientific evidence for young Earth creationism that you can for an Earth that's 4.5 billion years old. Which is why instead and I'll let you get back to what Anthony was saying too. Which is why instead of saying, here's why the Earth is young, you're simply arguing, nope, I don't accept the assumptions of science that lead to the conclusion that it's old. You don't have a ground.
To me, it don't matter.
What's that?
To me, it really doesn't matter. It could be 1 billion years old. It could be 1,000 years old.
This is what I don't get, because that actually doesn't matter.
But I was going to say, that conflicts with your earlier statement that you are searching for the truth, which I find admirable. I am too.
No, I mean, whatever the truth is, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, it could be...
Then you're not searching for the truth, right?
No, I said whatever the truth is, it doesn't matter.
Then why would you look for the truth?
It doesn't hurt my faith, is what I mean. It's not going to deter my faith.
So your faith is immune to the truth, is what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that the truth will always comport to what I believe in.
Okay.
All right, so I'm not worried about it. I don't have a bias either way.
No. You don't get to say you don't have a bias either way when what you just said is absolutely an admission of bias. Because you started by saying that you wanted to find the truth, and that's what led you to religion. And now you're saying that it doesn't matter what the truth is, your religion will win out.
No, what I'm saying is, excuse me, if the Earth is 6,000 years old or billions of years old, it still doesn't hurt my faith, like, at all.
His faith is not dependent on the age of the Earth.
The truth is,
okay,
exactly, God can make an Earth however age he wants to.
How do you know that?
Well,
how do you know that God can do anything?
Well, through his revelation, like I said before.
What? Okay.
He told us certain things that he can do and certain things that are not his nature. So,
what makes it a revelation?
Well, it's personal because it's not coming from like the dirt or the ether or the universe. It's the personal revealing of knowledge.
How does this personal revelation happen?
Well, are you talking about scripture?
I'm talking about for you. You're the one who's had a personal revelation. So I'm trying to understand what it is that you mean by personal revelation. How did you come by this revelation? How did you confirm that it was a revelation and not just your own suspicions or somebody else's thing? I mean, what is this? How does this revelation thing happen?
Well, I was just saying that in reference to you asking me, how do I know about that God can create a universe however old he wants to? I'd say, well, it's based on what he's told us in Scripture.
How do you know that God told us anything in Scripture?
If the first verse in that book is true, which I believe strongly that it is, then he can make an earth however old he wants to. It's not an issue.
Okay, so first of all, the question was, how do you know that God gave you this revelation? And what you said is, if the first book in the, first of all, you said if the first verse in the book is true. Well, if the first book verse in the book is true, that doesn't tell us anything at all about the rest of the verses being true. But you don't just get to assume that the first verse is true, do you?
No, I was just saying that when you're talking about how do I know that he could do that? Well, I'm saying, okay,
I'm asking
if
how
I take it at face value, that's how I know.
We moved on from that.
Earth, he can make it however old he wants. Right?
Yeah, I understand that. And now you're saying, when I asked you, how can you know he can do anything? Your answer was basically because he revealed it. And I'm now asking, how do you know that he revealed it?
I'd say it's personal. That's something I experienced. I'd say it's something that everyone has a innate knowledge of.
An innate knowledge.
I don't know how else. I don't know how else you expect a believer to tell you that. I mean, that's as real as I could be about it. It's a personal revelation from him to me, and I understand it.
Okay, do you understand?
That's what it is. I can't explain it any other way.
I have a question.
Do you understand that your personal revelation is absolutely useless to everybody else?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask.
Yeah, just like if you told me, well, I believe that atheism is true because I believe blah, 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 that doesn't mean crap for me or anybody that I know.
It does mean something to people who care about the truth, though.
Well, to them, right?
Because you have a belief, and I don't have that belief. And one of us, you could be correct or you might not be correct. And the question is, how do we tell if you're correct? And if your answer is, well, it's just personal, I can't prove it to anybody, how do you know you're not deluding yourself?
Well, just in the same way you can't prove to me that you really don't believe in God. That's kind of like one of those things.
So that's first of all, that's the two-quote fallacy, which I shouldn't have said by name. That was a big mistake. Sorry, Beth. So when I ask you, how do you know something? If you reply with, well, you can't know it either, you haven't answered my question at all. I'm not saying I can. I am not saying I can know.
What if
you are claiming to know, and I'm asking you how?
What if I told you that I was using personal revelation to know that the God didn't exist? It's the same method that you're using to know that you've arrived at the truth, is it not?
Well, it depends on what you mean personal. If you're saying that someone else told you, or you told yourself that God doesn't exist, like what kind of revelation are you talking
about? It was just personally revealed to me that there's no God. My point is what I'm trying to get at here is, do you think that personal revelation is the best way to determine if something is true?
I would say yes in some instances, and in this instance, being that God is the creator, yes. I mean, if he tells you something, it's for darn
sure. How do you know he's the creator?
True.
But you do recognize that people of other faith traditions would use the same personal revelation and arrive at completely different deities. Do you recognize that?
Right.
How do you explain that?
You and seeing which one can, cut the sauce, so to speak, break them down. Some people prefer a Hindu worldview or a atheistic worldview, and it works for them. But truth doesn't give a willy-nilly about what you feel about it.
I agree.
For me to sit here and try to tell you that Christianity is true and you should believe it because X, Y, or Z, I would be a fool to think that I could have any impact on you other than what God would influence you to for me to have over you.
That's not honestly true for me.
I can do is all we're doing is exchanging information. We're not implanting truth into other people's brain. That's something that they have to ascertain.
Now, you can convince people of the truth by the veracity of the evidence and arguments in support of your concept.
This is where we differ. I think they can become convinced.
Yes, people can become convinced. You don't think that you have I'm not saying that you physically reach in and change their mind, but if you don't think that you can make a compelling case to change someone's mind or to result in their mind being changed, that happens all the time.
But what if I asked you, how do you know that you don't believe in God? That's something that you say,
okay, so this
man.
This is the confusion. This is the confusion here, Artane. I didn't ask you, how do you know that you believe? I'm perfectly willing to accept that you are in fact aware that you believe.
Right.
I'm asking you why you believe. You can't demonstrate nobody could ever demonstrate to me that they in fact believe or in fact do not believe, because I'm not a mind reader. That is not what we're talking about. If you tell me you believe, I'm willing to accept tentatively that you do, because I have no way to investigate this. But when I ask you why you believe, that is something that we can investigate. People give reasons all the time. They give reasons because, they've had a personal revelation, or that Jesus came and spoke to them. They felt moved by this. They're convinced by the power of prayer. They have confirmation of prophecy. They think that the Bible is actually true. People give reasons, and then you can address them. That is completely separate from whether or not you can demonstrate that you do in fact believe. You are, at every turn when we ask a question, you are diverting away from it by saying, well, you can't prove that you don't believe, or you couldn't demonstrate that. None of that is the issue. You believe you believe that you have received a revelation, and what I've asked several times is, why are you convinced that you received a revelation?
Yeah, and like I said, when I started, it's just my journey. You know what I mean? I had time to put things in perspective and say, how does this work? God, if
I had a journey, and I had time to put things in perspective, and I reached out to God too. And even if God had spoken to me and explained things in such a way that I would have believed, if someone asked me why I believe, I would then give them the reasons why I believe. I would not respond to why do you believe by saying it's about my journey and asking God. Those aren't answers. Those are non-answers.
Well, what do you want? Like a scientific piece of evidence? You want a philosophical argument?
I want to know what convinced you. I don't get to decide what it is that you convinced you. I want to know what it is that convinced you.
Yeah, like I said, it wasn't just one thing. It was a whole walk. It was like one scientific piece of evidence after another.
Artane,
like evolution fell apart. I used to believe in evolution.
Jesus Christ, Artane. When I say what is the reason, I'm not presuming that it was in fact just one thing. I'd just like you to pick one for discussion.
Okay, well, like the one that I picked, I don't believe that the Earth is billions of years old anymore. I don't believe in evolution anymore.
You don't believe?
And we disagree on that.
Okay, so you don't believe
I'm not going to convince you.
But you did say that even if that could be demonstrated that the Earth was old, you'd still maintain the belief.
Yeah, so why would you bring up the age of the Earth if you just finished admitting that the age of the Earth isn't what your belief is contingent upon?
No, I brought that up just to kind of just say that, hey, as a believer, it doesn't matter if God created the Earth that old or he created it young. It doesn't change the truth.
Then why would you say that when pressed to finally give one explanation why would one of the first two things you say be the age of the Earth if you also
because I actually do see evidence for a young Earth that supports creation. It doesn't necessarily have to be. I'm not saying it's 100,000% sure. I'm just saying, to me, there's more evidence for young than an old. But personally, it doesn't freaking matter.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
All right.
So, yeah.
Do you have anything else?
No, other than, if I remember when we started the call, there was a misunderstanding about what you said that you knew and belief.
Yeah.
Which there might be a fundamental misunderstanding between those two possibly, but
I am curious just because of what Anthony does. How confident are you that a God exists?
How confident? I would say it's by the impossibility of the contrary, God exists.
Can you throw a percent on that? So you're saying it's impossible that there's no God?
Exactly. I would be 100%.
And one of your first two reasons for why is the age of the Earth, which isn't important, and that's because you reject the science.
Well, I said first and foremost, God's word, revelation is how I know for sure.
How do you know it's God's word?
Well, like I said, if I told you, you're just gonna say, well, that's not convincing. I'm just saying, he told me.
Artane, please. It is very, 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 very likely that I will not be convinced. But what I'm baffled by is if you are convinced that it's God's word, and I ask you why you're convinced, don't you have an obligation to at least try to explain to me? Isn't that part of the Great Commission for you as a Christian, to be telling people why you are convinced this is true?
Well, I tried, but you cut me off. I said it's not just one thing. It's a whole walk, and we can walk.
We're done.
I can walk you.
We're done.
Walk with you.
We're done, Artane. If you can't, every time I try to get you down to focus on one thing, you do this. It's not just one thing, or you do some tap dance out. All I wanted to know is.
Well, if you got specific.
All I wanted to know is, why do you think that the Bible is in fact God's word? That was it.
Well, aside from, like I said, the personal aspect of it, I would say examining it under scrutiny, it always holds up, and every other one that I've seen opposing it breaks down. So we can go the logical route, we can go the philosophical route, or you can go the scientific route.
You just absolutely said nothing. Oh, I examined it and it holds up. You gave us absolutely nothing of substance there.
Well, you want substance? Okay, I think the flood was absolutely 100% true. It was a worldwide flood.
Okay.
And if you want to be more specific, I don't think that the Earth is a ball anymore either. I'm skeptical of that now.
You don't think the Earth is a ball?
A spinning ball? No, I don't.
What do you think the Earth is?
I don't know, but it's certainly not a spinning ball.
It's not an oblate spheroid that rotates on an axis?
Not according to the evidence I've seen, no, sir.
What evidence have you seen?
Well, like
do you think we went to the moon? Do you think we went to the moon?
No. Do you think we did?
Okay. So at this point, what we've determined, and I'm sorry to say and put it this bluntly, is you are willing to reject everything about science that is inconvenient to your religious belief, right down to and including the moon landing. But we didn't even have to go to the moon, by the way. Do you not believe that we have satellites orbiting the Earth, or that space shuttles have orbited the Earth? Do you not believe the pictures of the round oblate spheroid?
You don't think I could say the same thing to you, that you'll believe anything that comports with atheism? Come on, man. It's not fair.
Nothing comports with atheism. Atheism isn't offering forth a proposition. It is the rejection of the theistic claim, which has not met its burden of proof, which you have demonstrated quite astutely today, that not only are you unwilling to attempt to demonstrate the burden of proof, but even in your misguided attempts to avoid doing that, your only hope is to throw out any and all science and claim that knowledge is entirely subjective and biased, and that I merely believe that the Earth is round because there's an atheistically biased. What difference does it make to atheism whether or not the Earth is round? As a matter of fact, what difference does it make to Christianity whether or not the Earth is round? But at the end of the day, are you on a cell phone right now?
I am on a cell phone, yes.
Yeah, you're using satellites that are orbiting around Earth. Goodbye.
That started out so good because he seemed like he wanted to search for the truth. It seemed like he was coming from an honest position of trying to get to the truth, but it seemed it was just dodge after dodge after dodge.
This is one of the frustrating things, is this idea of caring about what's true. I had a discussion, I'll probably continue it, with John Loftus, where he seemed baffled. I have a t-shirt that says, I want to believe as many true things as
I have
false
one of
things.
those.
He is unimpressed by it, thinks everybody would say that. And in one context, he's right, because we constantly get people who call the show and say, yes, I care about what's truth. I got to this because I wanted to know what's true. And when we explore, they have no understanding of skepticism, critical thinking. They have no respect for the scientific method and why these things get us closer to the truth than faith, personal revelation, etc.
I'm starting to have conversations with people where I'm coming at it from that. How do you value truth? Where are you on 0 to 100 on your value of truth?
Which is why you started with that question.
I guess so. I'm familiar with it, I suppose. But if somebody gives an answer other than 100%, what is that difference? If I say I value truth 80% of the time, well, what's on the other side of that? Sometimes it's comfort.
Yeah.
Sometimes it makes me feel better to believe something that might not be true.
In this case, and I try not to do this, but in this case, it's one of those things where it's become obvious that this was about buzzwords and partial understanding, because I submit that it is unlikely that anyone who properly understands the subject could say something like, I believe that God exists due to the impossibility of the contrary, that phrasing about a philosophical argument demonstrating that it is impossible that a God couldn't exist, nobody who properly understands that could have or would have said all of the other things that he said. And so that means he doesn't understand this, which means he's offering up buzzwords of language that he's gleaned nuggets from apologists in his study. That God exists because of the impossibility of the contrary, when nothing about the rest of his argumentation in any way related to that. And so apologists, by putting forth information, are creating theistic McNugget eaters who don't have an understanding of this, and that's not their fault. They've probably tried. I'm not remotely saying anybody's stupid. It is a matter of what your understanding of the subject matter is. And if you become convinced of things for bad reasons, that's fine. Everybody has become convinced of things for bad reasons. But if when those bad reasons are exposed, your defense is to merely claim that, nope, they're actually good. Nope, personal revelation is actually good. And personal revelation is more reliable in this context or in this special pleading category than scientific findings. And by the way, science is just biased. And then you get all the way to the earth not even being around.
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes how many callers are legit.
I was wondering about that myself. And that's, I don't know how much more time we want to spend blowing through
and
that
it's probably
one.
not fair to beat up on him after we've hung up. So let's just go on to an atheist caller we've got from James from Atlanta, Georgia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. How are you?
How you gentlemen doing?
Doing good.
Doing pretty well.
How are you?
All right. I was calling because, well, I'm an atheist. However, I've been seeing a lot of different signs that kind of have me second guessing. We start off by saying, I grew up as a Christian Baptist, and by the time I got to high school, I started reading up on different holidays that kind of related to paganism that had me questioning Christianity, but not whether Jesus came down and saved us, and et cetera, et cetera. However, when I got to college, I took a religion class, and it started us talking about Egypt, which kind of brings me back to why I started questioning things. But I'm talking about as far as being atheist. But I started reading up on Egypt, and I saw how Christianity took a lot of things from Egypt, and how that started my journey of becoming an atheist. So it took me about 10 years to kind of finally decide that this isn't for me, this isn't real. However, in the last year or so, I don't know if you guys believe in this whole New World Order thing or what have you, but just like in becoming an atheist, I did a whole lot of research. I read Christopher Hitchens. I would never take one book, just like it's crazy how Christians can just take one book and just,
Sure.
bet everything on that. I can't take one book or one video or whatever and just run with it. So just over a period of time, I just read up on a whole lot of things, and I started seeing a whole lot of things that had me start questioning whether, not necessarily there's a Jesus or whatever, but I'm starting to see a lot of satanic things, and I'm going to give you one specific dealing with science. I know you guys have heard of CERN and how I see the 666 logo within their logo. This is supposed to be about science, however they have a...
I'm not sure we know what you're talking about at all.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you guys got a computer in front of you, but if you pull up online their logo,
for what?
666 with their CERN.
Oh, CERN. CERN?
Yes. The guys that do the Hydro Collider.
Sure. That's why I thought you said it first, but then it sounded like SERG. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've got their logo in front of me.
All right. Between that and do you see the 666 there?
Well, I see.
Am I crazy?
I see two circles that are probably there to represent, particle orbits and the Hadron Collider, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tails. So if you were to see sixes in there, you would have 5 sixes and not 6. But that would still not.
What happens when you look at that logo?
I don't have the logo in front of me. That's what I'm looking at, but I saw a 666 in it.
Okay,
But
let's imagine,
way.
James, let's imagine for a second that irrespective of what their logo actually is, let's pretend for a moment that the CERN logo is just like a 666 with CERN written underneath it, like it was a blatant 666. We'll just imagine that that's the case. What conclusion can we reach from that?
Okay, now I don't mean, that doesn't mean that the devil is alive simply because they have a 666 as their logo or the devil is true now. However, with them being scientists, physicists, and I was going to go on to say they also have the Hindu deity goddess Kali, who is the Hindu goddess of destruction, as a statue in front of their building or whatever, with the circle around her that kind of maybe represents the circle, the ring, hydro collider. And it just seems like not just them, but a lot of things that I'm seeing going back to the Egypt time, because a lot of the New World Order or whatever, this Illuminati is supposedly plays into that worshiping Horus and all that other nonsense. And I'm seeing so much energy put toward that, from politicians to rappers to etc. And then you have CERN, who I think of all people who are supposed to be about the advancement of science, to be getting caught up in this, and this has me starting to question, okay, well, maybe this doesn't mean that there's a Jesus or whatever, but if there's bad, there has to be good. And if there's evil, there has to be, the opposite of whatever. Maybe there's something to this.
So I'm confused here because you're talking about New World Order,
Okay.
but you're also saying that you're seeing signs that you view as satanic.
Well, that all plays in with the New World Order. These satanic
Why?
signs. The same people who are supposedly part of the New World Order. I'll give you an example, the Rothschilds or whatever, supposedly. Again, I don't know how true this New World Order is, although I'm leaning toward that it is.
Okay.
But the Rothschilds are supposed to be part of that crowd. And I'm watching videos of them involved in satanic type things.
Okay.
I see them having the
James.
mask of Baphomet.
James, let's say that there are secret societies that are in fact controlling the world, and that they engage in rituals that you would identify as satanic. What does that tell us about whether or not there's a Satan or any sort of supernatural evil?
Well, to me, it just seems like if so much energy is put into this for people who are supposed to be the enlightened ones.
There's a whole bunch of
these people
James.
who
James, there's a whole bunch of energy put towards all kinds of things. There are a bunch of people putting energy towards perpetual motion machines, but that doesn't mean that it's possible.
I agree.
Okay, so let's say.
So
let's say
why
I'm
do you
convinced-
make an exception for this belief?
Well, this is another thing too. When I became an atheist or whatever, one of my major reasons why becoming one, not just because all the research and reading I was doing, but just a gut feeling. When I was a Christian or whatever, I mean, I did the song and dance, and I, grew up in the church, but I never really. I'm not going to say I was a non-believer in the church or anything like that, but I never really gave a deep thought. Did Jesus really do this? Did he really come back? Did he really, I never gave that all that much thought. So maybe I take that as maybe it just wasn't really real to me. I just had a really gut feeling that it just wasn't real. So now I'm just having a really gut feeling, not that
have you?
the devil is real and all that other nonsense, but I have a gut feeling that something isn't right.
Okay, have you had other?
I like to do.
James,
Hold on a sec.
have you had other gut feelings that turned out to be wrong?
Yes, not like this though.
Not
I
not
had a
like
gut
this.
feeling where I thought I was gonna fail a test and I wound up passing it, but that's something deeper. It's something that's something different. It's something deeper than something as simple as whether I'm gonna pass or fail a test or whether or not. It's a little deeper than that with this. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what makes a regular gut feeling different than the gut feeling that you have where there's something deeper? What's going on there? What makes it a deeper gut feeling than just a regular gut feeling?
I guess maybe the way it weighs on you, it sits on you, and sometimes I don't know if it plays on your conscience or what have you.
The more time you
I
spend,
can't
hold on a
put it
second.
down, but-
The more time you spend thinking about it, the more likely that it's a deeper gut feeling than just a regular gut feeling.
Well, let me give this. Let me be specific. When it came to me becoming an atheist versus being a Christian, that gut feeling just kept gnawing on me, saying this isn't right. I grew up in the church, and even in the church, I was sitting there like, man, like this not even making any sense or whatever. So that, like, a gut feeling that kind of gnaws on me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Why-
a real gut feeling. Not something as petty as,
Okay, do
whether or not to
you
get a job or not.
do you want to know what the truth is?
Of course.
Do you think that gut feelings are a good way to find out the truth?
No, that's why I say I don't just rely on my gut feeling. I
Okay,
said that
you rely on research. You rely on research. Okay. How do you
But see, the
why
research isn't going to let
James?
me know. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Why do you think that the sources that you're using for research are reliable? I mean, have you been listening to Alex Jones? Because I don't find him to be reliable.
No. I don't believe in.
I find it strange, James, that you're shrugging off Alex Jones when you're talking about the exact same things that he's suggesting. So, what are the sources of research that lead to a reasonable conclusion that there's something evil such that CERN secretly hid a 666 in their logo? And by the way, if there was something evil and its symbol was 666, why would it ever include it even in a way that you could find it? I mean, wouldn't it be better if I was the ultimate? If I was the ultimate evil, wouldn't it be better if I just managed to convince you that I don't exist and never hit a 666 anywhere?
No, but I think the average person, the lay person, I don't want to call it dumb or whatever, but it's ill-informed. It doesn't pay attention to things that are right there in front of our faces. Another quick example is how
I think we've got plenty of examples, but hold on a second, James. What I'd like to understand is why would you continue to use a method that you've recognized as unreliable? Why would you continue using a method going off of your gut feeling when you've recognized that it's not a reliable way to come to know that something is actually true?
Well, you're going back to just my gut feeling. I wouldn't just rely on my gut feeling. I also look at logic. I see things in front of me. Now, I don't know if we're questioning whether or not there's real satanic symbols being put out there, or we're questioning now whether those satanic symbols even mean that it's something satanic, really out there. What are we? So are you all dispelling everything that there's no such thing as any people conspiring to one world government, one world monetary system?
No.
Are you dispelling all of that, or are you just saying?
No, what we're saying,
It's quite possible that what you're worrying about and believing about is actually true. What we're trying to understand is using a gut feeling and thinking about it and perseverating on it for a long time and worrying about it, do you think that that's the most reliable way to know that it's true? And I think you said...
Of course not.
Okay.
But you also did research. But here's the thing that I want to get to, because we started with this, and I think this is a good point of focus. The CERN logo. I wish there was a way for them just to put it up on the screen. There probably is, but I don't want to put extra work on them. What it is it is basically two overlapping circles with a couple of tangent lines coming off of them. It's five of them, in fact. Okay? Now, I could certainly see, because it's a circle with a line, how people could see the number 6 in there, or even see 2 6s because there are 2 circles. I don't see how you can get to 3 6s without also going to 5 if you're using all the tails. But we've got a symbol here. Now, it's a very simple symbol, circles with a few tangent lines coming off of it. We know that we could describe the spin of electrons that way. We also know that the Large Hadron Collider, it could be represented by that circle. Is there a likelihood that I have 3 cameras sitting in front of me right now? 3 cameras. Each one of them has a round lens, and each one of them has a view screen off to the side, such that I could easily make a 6 there, a 6 there, and a 6 there. Have I found a hidden symbol with meaning, or have I just looked at something and said, there could be 3 6s there if I look at it this way?
Okay, man, I can give you that, but like I said, that's why if it was just that, I mean, I wouldn't just see those symbols or those supposed symbols and say, okay, that's it. CERN was of the devil. But also I go with the Hindu goddess statue in front of them.
Okay.
I go where CERN is located now, where it used to be where they worship Apollo, the goddess Apollo.
What difference does it make if they
God of the underworld?
James, what difference does it make if they have a Hindu god statue? Is the Hindu god satanic, or is it proof of anything real? I mean, there are zoos with Ganesh in front of like elephant enclosures. Every Chinese restaurant I go to around town will have a Buddha in it. There are plenty of.
But why are physicists having the god of destruction in front of their building?
Why wouldn't they?
She's supposed to represent the.
For the same reason that the Supreme Court has a frieze with ancient Greek and Roman gods on it, that these are cool-looking statues of mythology, doesn't mean that somebody is worshiping something, and it certainly doesn't mean that physicists have gotten together and said, let's create the Large Hadron Collider in order to demonstrate the Higgs boson, because we secretly have a plan to destroy the world. It would be the least efficient plan of destroying the world because, first of all, it's not going to destroy the world.
Now, I never said anything about them destroying the world.
But you seem to think that they are.
I heard the physicists saying out of their own mouths how they want to open up dimensions. Now, that can be coded. People can take that a lot of different ways. Some people are taking it as opening up.
You can take a lot of things a lot of different ways. The question is, what's the right way to take it?
Well, you tell me. If you between. I know you want to dismiss the Hindu goddess. Hindu goddess like that, but I think that's different from the Supreme Court and all that whole they say you want to separate church from state, but they really don't. Physicists, I would think, would have a different mindset. And other than a couple of stars and planets or whatever named after the Greek and goddess, why are we going backwards? Why are we? I mean, that was so yesteryear. Gods and goddesses and stuff. I mean, I don't understand why physicists would even be caught up in
one of the ways.
Like that.
One of the ways to demonstrate progress is to highlight it by showing where we've come from. And this is why scientific endeavors often will use mythological statues and figures to describe or as an emblem for something. You know, you've got Hercules and, well, I'm the wrong person to go through them all. But what we do is if we show where we've been, that adds a colorful counterpoint to where we think we're going. It doesn't mean that we're trying to go backwards. Certainly CERN isn't trying to go backwards. It doesn't mean that we believe in this secretly and are trying. I mean, this is a lot of fear-mongering that I remember happening in the late 70s, early 80s, where, you know, the Procter & Gamble logo supposedly had 6s in the side, where people are being fed nonsense from a pulpit to the point where they start to see evil everywhere lurking. It's in this video. This thing here spells sex in this Disney movie. And sometimes they're there for real and they're intentional, and they are still not necessarily evil. And so what you're doing is you're looking at the CERN logo, which we put up on the screen, and saying, hey, I see a 666 there. Okay, I see 2 circles with 5 tangents. But at the end of the day, even if it was just 666, which is why I tried to do this earlier, what conclusion can we reach from that? And the only answer I can come up with is right now I can't reach any conclusion. But the people who are suggesting that maybe there's some satanic undertones that's secretly trying to take over the world, the biggest objection I have to that is any reasonably intelligent evil being or group that was trying to take over the world would not go around slapping secret messages on it for people to interpret. You would never see it coming.
I forget the statement. I wish I had it to repeat it word by word. But that's part of their creed. They had to kind of let them know.
I know it's this idea of hiding in plain sight. It's this idea of hiding in plain sight because it's so ridiculous. See, if they put out little teasers, if they hide their logos, then they get people to believe it, and those people get written off as paranoid conspiracy theorists, and this serves to better hide their agenda, right?
Right.
Right. So if both of those scenarios equally or both of them serve to hide the conspiracy, let's imagine there was no conspiracy. Would we still see 666 places? Would we still see Hindu gods places, even if there was no conspiracy?
Yes, but I don't think we would see it all through people's rap videos and all seeing eyes and pyramids and all that in pop culture like I see it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't understand what's going on with that. Like,
I have one question for you, James, real quick.
Even the movies that be coming out, all these movies about these gods and these the last X-Men movie, and I forget the other movie where they're talking about Horus and Set, and it just came out a few months ago, I think.
So when I
can't
was a
think of
kid
the
in
name, but it
Clash
seems
of the
like it's a lot
Titans, when I was a kid and Clash of the Titans came out, was that a secret message?
No.
But these
when,
are.
When you see the constant bombardment, when you start to see the constant bombardment, like, I didn't seen about.
You don't think there was a constant bombardment at other times?
I don't know. I mean, I'm only but so.
Is it actually a constant bombardment, or is this the butterfly effect? Not the butterfly effect that most people are familiar with, but as soon as you mention butterfly, people start to notice butterflies more often, even though they're actually not any more common than they were before. Somebody has clued you in to this particular image or a collection of images, and now, even though they were there, even though they were there the whole time, you just see them more.
Maybe that is the whole point. Maybe they have been there the whole time, and that's the whole point of it. Like I said, I see cartoons from when I was a kid that I grew up on. I'm like, wait a minute, there's the all-seeing-eye pyramid there that I would never even thought about that back when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I'm seeing it now as a 30-some-odd adult or whatever. So they have been there all the time. Now we just have people.
Yeah, one more question, James, before we go on to somebody else here.
Because we're about out of time.
Oh, are we really?
Yeah, it goes fast.
If you had a very important decision to make tomorrow, and you could either use logic or your gut feeling, and it was extremely important, life or death situation, which of the two would you choose?
Of course, logic. But again, that's why I said we keep going back to my gut feeling. I wouldn't just rely on my gut feeling.
Okay.
When these things start becoming a coincidence to me, when I start seeing a pattern of things.
How do you tell the difference?
Logically, like, wait a minute.
James, how do you tell the difference between a pattern and coincidence?
I think a pattern happens over and over and kind of over again.
You don't think coincidences can happen over and over again?
Not necessarily. I mean, well, I guess you got me there, back. Yeah.
Okay. We're about out of time. I gotta let you go, but you can call back and we can talk about it some other time.
He had mentioned that he is an atheist, and I kept wondering if he abandoned his God belief for the same
bad reasons.
Yeah,
and it's very possible, but we didn't really kind of get into that. I want to get to Diana, who's been on hold for 2 whole shows from Romania.
Oh my goodness!
So thanks for waiting more patiently than anybody, and we'll go over time to make sure we get your call.
Hey, Diana.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. What's up?
Well, I'm trying to stay awake right now. It's 2 a.m. here.
Well, we're glad that you stayed awake. Thank you. What's on your mind?
Okay, so I'm trying to think of ways to tell my parents that I'm an atheist, as I've been raised in a Pentecostal family. And my biggest issue is that the talk about hell. It's not suspense wager. They're sure that I would go to hell, and
right.
I don't know exactly how to talk to them about that.
Well, this will be good because we might have different responses to this. So go ahead.
Sure. So I would wonder what your financial situation's like. Are you living at home? How old are you?
I am 25 years old. I am actually, we are living in different cities, so that's not a problem.
If you feel that you might get kicked out on the street for professing your atheism?
Nothing like that.
Okay.
Nothing like that.
Are you more worried about the reaction? They might feel guilty or bad for you or worried about you?
Exactly. That's exactly what I feel.
I went through a similar thing with my parents when they realized I was a non-believer. And it finally dawned on me to tell them that I don't believe your God exists. And I know that it's a tremendous amount of strife for you to worry about me, but please put that responsibility on your God. Don't take that upon yourself. And when I said that, I could literally see the relief wash over my parents' faces by doing that.
This is almost identical to what happened with me.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I basically asked my folks, I said, okay, you believe that there's a God. You believe this God has a plan. You believe this God wants me to know he exists. and you believe that you can pray and that God will either reveal himself to me or he won't. What this did was they had been in this position of feeling guilty that they had failed me as spiritual leaders, that they had fallen down and not done their responsibility to properly lead me to God. And when I reminded them that according to their religion, which would be the same in Pentecostals, it's not their job. My salvation is not on their heads. They've done their job in sharing the gospel, and now it's up to God to decide if he's going to reveal himself. And the nice thing is they know me well enough that they know if God reveals himself to me, I will acknowledge it and I will believe. I may not worship, I may not like the guy, depending on what I find out, but I will at least not remain a non-believer. And so I told them, you know that you're not going to convince me by preaching at me, by giving me your personal testimony. None of those things are going to be compelling. I need evidence and good reason. And so the best thing you can do, given your beliefs, is to pray for God to reveal himself to me in his own time, in his own way. And as soon as I said that, that takes the responsibility off of them, puts it back on their God, on their religion where it's supposed to be, and we'll never get back to the relationship we had, but we have a new relationship that is a new normal and relatively healthy. I get along with them. I'm going up to help them move here in a week or so, in like 10 days. So those sorts of things, making sure that this is on their terms, that this is not about them, this is not about their failing, that this is not about you just rebelling and or a fad or anything like that, that you are just seriously not convinced and that you perhaps have good reasons to, that you're open to talking about it with them, with some limits. You don't get to have to be badgered by them, and that you're happy to continue a relationship with them, irrespective of your differences about religion.
Is that an option for you to have a conversation like that?
That's actually exactly what I needed. That was a great advice, and I'm sure it will work in my case.
Well, I'm sorry you had to wait 2 shows to get it, but I'm glad that it was helpful. And by all means, stay in touch. Let us know how it's going. How this worked out for you, and whether it worked or not. Share your lessons learned from this with other people who are coming out. Because I don't know what our reach in Romania is. So until I hear differently, Diana is the official ambassador. Well, I can't do it for the Atheist Experience, but you are my personal official ambassador in Romania until I choose another.
Wow. Impressive.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Diana.
Bye-bye.
There's one last guy I want to get to, and then we're going to Threadgills. The address is on the bottom of the screen. I know we're running a little bit over time, but there were a lot of people who waited, and we've got
a lot of callers.
And I hate it that we're not going to...
How much time do we have left?
Let's get to this one because it's about street epistemology. We're over time. This is Scott in Wyoming who wants to talk to Anthony. Thanks, Scott.
Oh, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes. Go for it.
What's up, dude?
And I think some of these calls today might have highlighted this, but Anthony, I really think that your SE method is the way to go about the conversation to get the seed of doubt, as you say, planted. And you recommend that they come back to you for maybe a second or a third follow-up conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if at some point, I know you don't want to do a lot of telling, but can we offer up information on education?
Oh, sure.
Say talk origins.
This
things
is
about
actually
evolution.
I'm laughing, Scott. I'm not laughing at you. This is Anthony and I went to lunch today, and this was actually a point that I raised up about the subtle differences between the conversation and how encouraging doubt is one necessary, worthy goal, but I think it's only a part of the thing. So I'm thrilled that you asked this. So.
There are times where I'll have a conversation with a believer, and yes, I like to have multiple conversations with a person, and typically they will lower their confidence so much where they no longer even want to maintain the belief. Not necessarily about gods, but it could be other things too.
Right.
You do reach a point where you're having conversations with people and they start asking for resources, or it will become apparent to you that they need resources, they need a community. It's one of the reasons why I'm such a proponent of being out if you can. It's one of the reasons why I asked Diana if she was able to be out. There are people that are going through that journey, they're embracing doubt, they abandon a belief. And it's a lot easier, I think, if there's a community waiting for them to catch them. So yeah, I think
Absolutely.
at some point I do think that it's important to mention the resources that are out there, whether it's the SSA, on-campus universities. There's the Clergy Project if you're talking to a minister or a priest or a layman or something like that. We have the Recovering from Religion Foundation. How could I forget them? It's a hotline that you can call. You can call or chat and talk to people that will listen to what you have to say, and they won't judge you or try to even instill doubt. They are extremely neutral. They listen to you and give you the resources that you need. So, yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
that's why I think that's why the SE method is so critical. Is trying to give them the information first in the apologetics, anti-apologetics fashion. It doesn't get through because
There's a
not
right time for it
at that point.
Yeah, there seems to be a right time for it. And
there's also a right audience. Which we've learned.
The venue is important, and hopefully we can share the presentation that I gave today.
Yeah, it is best one-on-one, and
one-on-one is a lot better.
And the person you're talking to has to be actually open to being honest in assessing their own issues, which is why, when Anthony does it, he is there trying to be as neutral as possible and asking questions. I don't have, to the extent that I have any objections to SE, they are trivial. It is this idea that, there's nothing really new about this. It's the Socratic method. It's just kind of, tailored a little bit. But I also think it's only part of the equation. And this is what we were talking about at lunch, is if I'm in a one-on-one conversation, which people don't really see on the show, they'll see me having, even if I am the only one on my side talking, there's still an audience and it's a different arena. If I'm on an airplane with somebody, the conversation proceeds much differently than it would here, in part because, I can't hang up on, well, I can put my earbuds in, but the other aspect of this is, and it's why I want to do this new project where I'm sitting around having discussions, conversations, because there's a view that what SE is one way of you tell me why you believe something and I'm just asking questions. There's another aspect of this, which is now that we've got somebody to the point where they have been gifted with doubt and they are maybe perhaps shaken, there are tools that they'll need to learn, which require some effort. There is information that they'll have to get. There are resources that they'll have to get, both the RFR and the various sites that we've already talked about. But also, I think giving them an option. People have said before, when you get rid of religion, what do you replace it with? And Dennis Loubet, I love, because his response to this is, once you get rid of the cancer, what do you replace it with? That getting rid of the cancer alone is the goal. But in my case, that's not necessarily good enough, because getting someone to understand what their confidence level is, that maybe they said 100%, but it's really like 70, doesn't mean we've changed their mind about anything other than their ability to assess their confidence level. Doesn't mean we've changed their mind on the foundational belief. My goal is to change people's minds about those foundational beliefs, and that in part not only requires gifting them with doubt, which SE is phenomenal at, carrying on with extended conversations after, which Anthony does, and they're posted in additional videos, but also offering up not only why we don't believe, but in many cases what we in fact do believe, which is why I'm a strong advocate for skepticism and secular humanism, because there is a perception from theists that if they give that up, they are going off into a void where anything goes and there is no knowledge, no morality, there's no sense of anything, there's no purpose in life.
And
giving them those answers, I think, is good.
I've said this before in a couple different talks, that SE is great for opening the door if the person is willing to walk through it.
Yep.
If they're open and honest and they really want to know the truth and believe true things, and we're not professing that we know the truth, but if they're willing to walk through it, then yes, you can actually sit down at the table and start presenting evidence and getting into the support systems that are available to them.
And on that note, I thank you for the call, but unfortunately I have to think about all the people who are sitting in the studio watching and our crew who sat diligently through the show.
I could have talked for 2 more hours.
We could have done hours. We should we'll just do some hangout discussions after
I like
this.
that, yeah.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Atheist Experience. My apologies to the people we didn't get to on the phone. Sorry. Sometimes that's going to happen. It's always going to happen that there are going to be people on the phone. And thanks to the studio audience on the other side of the fishbowl, and to Kevin and John in there for making the show happen. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. And thanks to you for being you.
Wow. Thank you. I love you, Matt. Honestly.
Hi, this is Russell Glasser, host of The Atheist Experience. You know, The Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.